What if I told you that one of the most powerful weapons used in World War II was a tomato plant? Not a tank, not a fighter jet, not some classified military technology buried in a government bunker. A tomato plant. Sounds ridiculous, right? Sounds like something a history teacher says to get a laugh on a slow Tuesday. But here's the thing. It's not a joke. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why. At the peak of World War II, ordinary Americans, grandmothers, school kids, factory workers, apartment dwellers grew nearly half of all the vegetables consumed in this entire country from their backyards, their rooftops, their window boxes. This is the story of Victory Gardens, and it's one of the most quietly remarkable chapters in American history. To understand why Victory Gardens existed, you need to understand what America looked like in the early 1940s. The United States had just been pulled into a catastrophic global war. Millions of young men were being shipped overseas. Factories that once made cars were now churning out tanks. And the entire agricultural system, the whole machine that fed the country, was under enormous strain. Here's what was happening simultaneously. First, the military needed food. Millions of soldiers need millions of meals every single day. Feeding an army at war is a logistical nightmare. Second, the Allied nations, Britain, France, our partners abroad, were also depending on American food exports. German U-boats were sinking hundreds of supply ships crossing the Atlantic. Every cargo ship lost was food that never arrived. Third, the farm labor force had been gutted. The men who used to work those fields, they were now soldiers. So the government introduced rationing, meat, sugar, butter, canned goods, all limited. You got ration books, ration stamps. When they ran out, that was it. You were done for the month. The question became, how do you feed 130 million Americans when the food supply is stretched to its absolute limits? The answer was elegant in its simplicity. Grow it yourself. A Victory Garden was exactly what it sounds like. A garden you grew in wartime to help secure victory. But the term was more than a label. It was a message, a philosophy, a call to action. The core idea was this: if you grow your own vegetables at home, then the food being commercially farmed can go straight to the troops and our allies. Every head of lettuce you pull from your backyard soil is one less head of lettuce that needs to be shipped, stored, transported, rationed. You weren't just gardening, you were fighting. Victory Gardens popped up everywhere in the backyards of suburban homes, on the rooftops of New York City apartment buildings where residents hauled bags of soil up 10 flights of stairs, in school courtyards across the country where children planted beans and carrots alongside their teachers. In public parks, Golden Gate Park in San Francisco had them, Boston's Fenway District had them, the Portland Zoo had them. Even window boxes traditionally filled with flowers for decoration were converted into tiny vegetable plots. And you already know who had one, right? We'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's talk scale. Did you know? Even the White House had a Victory Garden. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt planted one on the White House lawn in 1943, despite President Roosevelt's protests that the soil was full of rocks. Okay, let's get into the numbers, because this is where it gets genuinely astonishing. 20 million plus Victory Gardens planted across the U.S. during WWII. 40% of all vegetables consumed in America in 1944 came from Victory Gardens. An estimated 8 to 10 million tons of food grown by ordinary citizens. 20 million gardens in a country of 132 million people. That's not a trend. That's not a movement. That is a complete cultural transformation of how an entire nation related to food. Think about your neighborhood. Picture every house on your block. Now picture every single one of those backyards converted from a lawn to a productive vegetable garden. Now multiply that by every block, in every town, in every city, in every state, for 4 years straight. That's what this was. By 1942, 15 million families had already planted. By 1944, that number had climbed past 20 million. 2/3 of those gardens were in towns, cities, and suburban areas, not farms. These were regular people many of whom had never grown anything in their lives, learning on the fly how to produce real, meaningful quantities of food. A husband and wife in Los Angeles, the Williams family, reportedly grew 26 varieties of vegetables for just $8.60 in supplies, enough to feed their household and half their neighbors. A blind World War I veteran named Chester Lancaster grew an abundant garden entirely by touch, harvesting surplus to share with his community. This was happening everywhere. Now, none of this happened accidentally. The scale of the Victory Garden movement was the result of one of the most sophisticated, sustained, and genuinely effective propaganda campaigns in the history of the United States. The government understood something important. You can't force 20 million people to grow vegetables, but you can make them want to. So they went to work. Propaganda posters were plastered across the country, vivid, bold, emotionally charged. They showed families proudly tending their gardens. They showed Uncle Sam pointing at a vegetable patch. One poster read simply, "Our food is fighting." Another, "Plant more in 44." One of the most striking wartime slogans came from Agriculture Secretary Claude Wickard, who told the press in 1943, "Food will win the war and write the peace." Radio programs spread the message into every living room. The Office of Civil Defense distributed pamphlets with planting schedules, fertilizer formulas, and step-by-step guides for first-time gardeners. Agricultural companies sent tips tailored to regional climates. Schools integrated Victory Garden participation into the curriculum. Even pop culture got involved. Mickey Mouse called on young gardeners to pursue the 3 V's, vegetables, vitamins, and vitality. Batman and Superman, icons of American strength, were shown taking a break from fighting fascists to grow tomatoes. Bob Hope's daughter tended her bean sprouts while her father entertained troops overseas. The messaging was brilliant because it was layered. It appealed to patriotism. This is your duty as an American. It appealed to self-sufficiency. You can do this yourself. It appealed to community. Your neighbors are doing it, your leaders are doing it, your heroes are doing it. It wasn't just a gardening campaign, it was a national identity movement. So what exactly were people growing in these 20 million gardens? The most popular crop, by a wide margin, was the tomato. Easy to grow in almost any climate, high yield, versatile in cooking. After that, string beans, onions, lettuce, radishes, beets, and carrots, potatoes, cabbage, peas, Swiss chard. These weren't exotic or complicated crops. They were chosen deliberately because the goal was maximum food output with minimum gardening expertise. The government published guides specifically designed for people who had never grown anything before, laying out exactly what to plant, when to plant it, how much space was needed, how to manage pests. But here's the part that often gets overlooked. Growing the food was only half the challenge. You also had to preserve it, because vegetables don't last forever. So families learned canning, pickling, drying, fermenting. Women's magazines ran articles on how to process a harvest. A poll taken in January 1944 found that a remarkable 75% of American housewives were canning their own food, and those women canned an average of 165 jars per year. 165 jars per year per household. Surplus was shared with neighbors, donated to community centers, traded between families. What began as individual gardens became informal local food networks, a kind of organic, grassroots food system operating in the margins of the rationed economy. Here's where I want to slow down for a second, because what Victory Gardens did for American society goes far beyond the vegetable count. Think about what it felt like to be a civilian in 1942. Your brothers, your sons, your husbands are gone, shipped off to fight in places you'll never visit, facing things you can't imagine. The war is distant, but the dread is everywhere. You read the casualty reports, you hear the news on the radio, you feel powerless, and then someone hands you a seed packet and says, "This matters. What you do in your backyard matters. Your hands, your effort, your soil." It's connected to something larger. That wasn't nothing. That was everything. Historian and researcher Anastasia Day put it well. The Victory Garden showed individuals and families that they were not powerless, that they could indeed help the war effort. Gardening became a daily ritual of purpose, a way of turning fear into action. There's something deeply human about growing food. It grounds you. It forces patience. It gives you a visible, tangible result from your effort. In a time of massive global chaos and when the world felt completely out of control, here was something you could actually do. Something with a beginning, a middle, and a beautiful, edible end. And the social effects rippled outward. Neighbors who had never spoken began trading seeds and gardening tips. Communities organized shared plots on vacant lots in city parks. Knowledge moved between generations. Grandparents teaching grandchildren skills that had skipped a generation in the industrial age. Interestingly, even Japanese Americans who had been unjustly incarcerated in internment camps planted victory gardens inside those camps, often knowing they might not even be there to harvest what they'd grown. Some brought seeds with them when they were forced from their homes. They grew gardens as an act of patriotism, of resilience, of identity. Victory Gardens turned a nation of anxious bystanders into active participants. It turned fear into purpose. So, the war ends. Victory is declared. The boys come home, and then the gardens largely disappear. Why? The short answer is everything that made victory gardens necessary went away at the same time. Rationing ended. Agricultural production ramped back up. The soldiers turned farmhands returned. Industrial food production accelerated dramatically through the late 1940s and 1950s, fueled by new technologies, synthetic fertilizers, and a booming economy. The supermarket emerged as the defining symbol of modern American abundance. Why grow it yourself when you can buy it? Packaged, labeled, and perfectly uniform. From a gleaming refrigerated aisle, suburban expansion also played a role. Historians note that as American families moved into new suburbs, many opted for private green lawns rather than productive gardens. The lawn became a status symbol. A garden suggested need. A perfect grass lawn suggested prosperity. The researcher Anastasia Day, who has studied victory gardens extensively, noted that a similar pattern plays out whenever a crisis-driven behavior meets peacetime convenience. People got their seeds ready, got their tools, got their plots, and then discovered that gardening is a lot of work and isn't always fun. So the movement faded, almost as rapidly as it had appeared. Within a decade, America had gone from a nation of backyard farmers to a nation almost entirely dependent on commercial agriculture and the supermarket supply chain, a complete cultural reversal in less than 10 years. So here's the question. Does any of this matter today? Is Victory Garden history just a charming World War II story? Or is there something genuinely relevant still living inside it? I think there's a lot. Look at where we are right now. Food prices have surged dramatically in recent years. Supply chain disruptions, whether from pandemics, extreme weather events, or geopolitical conflict, have revealed just how fragile our just-in-time food delivery system really is. Climate change is putting pressure on agricultural regions worldwide, and across the country, there's a quietly growing movement of people who are asking, should I know more about where my food actually comes from? Urban gardening is booming. Community garden plots have waiting lists in major cities. The rooftop agriculture industry is growing. Farmers markets have become central features of urban neighborhoods. The pandemic years saw a dramatic spike in seed sales and backyard gardening, a response strikingly similar to what happened in 1942. And here's a fact worth sitting with. A standard backyard garden of 600 square feet, well managed through a growing season, can provide a meaningful portion of a family's annual vegetable needs. Not all of it, but enough to matter. Enough to reduce your grocery bill. Enough to give you tomatoes that actually taste like tomatoes. Could a 21st century version of Victory Gardens work? Not necessarily driven by wartime necessity, but by something equally urgent? The tools we have now are arguably better than anything available in 1943. Online communities share planting guides, seed saving techniques, canning tutorials. Hydroponics makes it possible to grow fresh greens in an apartment with no outdoor space. Raised bed kits require almost no gardening knowledge to get started. The barrier to entry has never been lower. What we might be missing is the one thing the government in 1942 supplied so brilliantly, a compelling reason why. In World War II, the reason was clear. The cause was visible. The need was undeniable. The propaganda connected the individual act, digging in the dirt, to the largest collective endeavor in human history. What would our reason be today? Climate resilience, food sovereignty, community connection in an increasingly isolated world, rising costs, a simple, grounded alternative to the algorithmic noise of modern life, maybe all of the above. We started this with a question: what if one of the most powerful weapons in World War II was a tomato plant? I hope by now you can feel the answer, because it wasn't really about the tomatoes. It was about what the tomatoes represented. Collective action at an almost unfathomable scale. The willingness of ordinary people to show up every day in their own backyards with dirt under their fingernails and say, "I'm doing my part." 20 million gardens, 40% of the nation's vegetables, grown not by industrial agriculture, not by government programs, but by families, by kids, by retirees, by apartment dwellers with rooftop plots, by people who had never grown anything before in their lives. Turns out, one of the most powerful wartime tools wasn't a weapon at all. It was a garden. And maybe it still is. Would you start your own victory garden? Have you already? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video interesting, consider hitting subscribe. There are a lot more forgotten chapters of history where this came from. I'll see you in the next one.